I used to do deliveries, not actually a truck driver though. I used to have this regular that was out in the boondocks, 25 miles out of the way of civilization and smack dab in the middle of two large towns. I would drive this route maybe once a month and would always pass it at least one car driving towards me due to the sheer length of the drive. There was a small group of houses on this route that were really broken down, and I never saw anyone around them in the 6 months of driving that route. Always assumed they were vacant because they didn't look livable. Well, I was driving out to this customer one fall afternoon, had been driving for a very long time without seeing a single car drive towards me. Finally drive past the abandoned houses, and there's one old lady in her front yard pushing an old manual grass cutter, but she stops in her tracks as I drive towards her. I took it as a sign that I was speeding or something and slowed down. I take a quick glance in my rearview mirror after passing her by, and she was staring straight at me. She dropped the grass cutter and turned 180 to do this. It was just very odd and definitely set off my spidey senses. I never saw her again or anyone else on that route by those houses in the 10 months that I drove it. Not a truck driver, but once I was driving through the Canadian Rockies late at night and had just passed through a small town. So I'm driving through the pitch black and I need to stop to pee and have a smoke. But because it's so dark, I missed the last rest stop for the next while. So no problem, the highway's completely deserted. So I pulled to the side of the road, have my pee while staring out into the dark, and then light up a cigarette as I stand by my car. As I'm standing there, I see the figure of a man just walking out of the tree line. I'm miles from civilization, patchy cell phone service. There isn't a soul on the road. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, and maybe it was just a deer. But nope, this was a man. So I calmly walk back to the driver's door and get in, locking the doors behind me. I'm keeping my eye on this guy as I nervously smoke and have my car in drive, ready to peel out. But for some reason, I just stayed put. The guy walks right up to my passenger door and knocks on the window. I crack the window open and I ask, "What's up?" He replies to me in a very, very serious tone. "I need you to call the cops." I cautiously ask why, and he tells me he had gone out into the woods to kill himself, but he couldn't go through with it because he had thought of his daughters right before he was about to do it. I call the cops while the guy quietly cries outside. He had a kitchen knife that he was going to use on himself, so I stayed in the car and advised him to maybe leave the knife on the ground before the cops arrive. The cops came and got him, but before they left with him, I gave him a solid heart-to-heart and I wished him well. I still think about him. I hope he was able to turn things around. I pulled into a Purdue plant to drop my trailer off and go park where they allow bobtails to sit, right next to a nice little pond. My pickup was in 12 hours, so I do PTI and lay down in the bunk. At about 3 a.m, I heard something tapping on my passenger's side door. I get up, look out the window expecting to see someone, maybe a driver asking for a lumper check, but no one's there. Maybe I'm hearing things, so I go and lay back down. As soon as my head hits the pillow, I hear the tapping again, except this time it's on my driver's side door. Same thing as before, I jump up and look out my window, but there's nothing there. Double lock my doors just in case, and open my side hatches so I can hear what's going on outside. After about 15 minutes, I hear a very light splat, 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 going along the driver's side of the truck. I slowly get up, planning to look out of my window at the exact same moment whoever it is knocks on the window again. And then I hear a thud coming from the roof of the cab. I stop, grab my tyre thumper off its hook, and ready myself for whatever the hell is going on. Then, a freaking goose falls off the top of the truck and lands on my hood. It stands up, waddles back and forth, and looks at me. As we make eye contact, the tapping at my door starts again. I say screw it and open the door. And there's another damn goose waddling away with all the speed it can manage, honking like a 5-year-old that just found the horn on his new bike. The pond that I parked next to had a ton of them just dicking about. Needless to say, it was hard to sleep that night because every couple of minutes the damn geese would peck at my door or land on the cab and waddle around. Trucker here. I think the best creepy thing that ever happened to me was I was heading from Tucson, Arizona, into Salt Lake City, Utah. Well, this was a few years ago, and the main highway had been taken out in a flash flood, which was under construction. So I had to take a weird detour through the mountains in lower Utah. Well, it was getting late and I was getting tired, so I pulled off onto the shoulder and went to sleep in my bunk. Now, this was in the middle of nowhere. The closest town was like 40 miles away, so it was completely pitch black outside once I turned the lights off. Anyway, around 4 a.m. I wake up because I'm hearing someone or something messing with my truck, like playing with the air and the power cables between my cab and the trailer, which is literally 6 inches from where my head is at, but on the outside of the cab. Then I feel something climb onto the landing that's on the back of my truck, and it shakes my whole truck. So I'm guessing something around 200 to 300 pounds was climbing around back there. I'm thinking like a mountain lion or a bear. At this point, I'm wide awake and I want to get this thing away from me. So I slam my hand into the cab wall, trying to scare whatever it is out of there. Slam. Hard enough to make it really loud. I then hear someone, a male, scream bloody murder, and I hear them all fall off the back of my truck. I then hear about 15 other people all around my truck yelling. I climb up front, turn on my lights and illuminate a squad of army reserves doing their midnight rucks, march and capture drills. Turns out these guys were supposed to go find an abandoned truck and secure it for their midnight drills. That truck was about 3 miles back down the road. They were not expecting me to be sleeping there and thought I was part of the drill. I'm ex-military, so after explaining that I was not part of their test and legit was just there out of coincidence, we laughed it off. They had to radio their CO and tell them I was there and not have any more squads bother me. I used to deliver hotshot freight across the Great Plains, Minnesota area. One night, around 2 a.m., I was hauling across for the following day. I began to notice some highway hypnosis sneaking up on me, but it didn't really bother me because I'd been through it hundreds of times before. Anyone who has driven across North Dakota knows that it is incredibly flat, like really flat. There also tends to be very straight and long roads. It's somewhat easy to see things on the roads that are far away, even at night. I noticed something long on the road, spanning my entire lane, approximately half a mile in front of me. I slowed down a little and prepared to move into the opposite lane, thinking it was some retread of a blown tyre. As I got closer, I noticed it was 2 people, laying head to toe across the entire lane. I swerved into the other lane, successfully avoiding them, and came to an almost complete stop. But they didn't move. Not an inch. I was just about to back up and check on them when I remembered a story that an old grey-beard colleague of mine told me. He told me that in certain remote areas, people will lay down in the middle of the road and wait for a car or truck to stop and see what's going on. At that point, the road layers, along with whoever else is hiding in the nearby bushes, will beat the shit out of the driver and steal his vehicle, leaving him in the middle of nowhere. I decided not to back up, and when the 2 people in the road saw me put my truck back in gear and drive away, they both got up and walked towards the shoulder. I called the police and explained what happened, but we were so far away from civilization that I doubt anything came of it. Thanks to that old greybeard, I got to keep my truck, my job, and my teeth. I used to drive trucks in North Manitoba. There's a road in the northeast you can drive for several hours and see very few vehicles. The road is quite flat, straight in stretches, and of course, this is deep in the brush. One day I saw something cross the road in the distance. Very large, easily past the hood on my truck, but not long like a moose or elk, just tall. It disappeared into the brush, and as I drove by the spot, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I heard days later a tow truck describing on the radio his encounter with a similar creature, only he was much more clear that he had spotted Bigfoot. This guy went to some length to explain he didn't want people thinking he was crazy, but he was sure what he saw. I asked an Aboriginal client of mine in a nearby community, and he said the elders spoke of them as commonly as they spoke of the other animals. I don't know what I saw that day, but I'm certain it wasn't a bear, moose, deer, or elk. I just don't know what the hell it was. Driving through rural New Mexico, Bisty area with the crazy melted rock look. No plants or anything, just rock and sand. Monsoon time, raining cats and dogs, just pouring so hard you can barely see out of the windscreen, going 20 miles an hour. Thunder and lightning just rocking the car, sometimes turning into hail and pounding you. It was just a nasty storm. I came around a corner and the whole countryside legit was on fire, like 20-foot tall flames, hundreds of yards in all directions, while pouring rain at dusk. Just rocks and dirt wildly on fire in the pouring rain. I just slowly drove on. It was totally freaky and unsurreal. Honestly, I thought I may be hallucinating. I checked the news and it turned out it was a propane tank that slid off the road because it was going too fast and apparently busted open pretty violently, then lit on fire. I never saw the truck. It must have been hidden behind something. I felt a bit bad for not stopping. My friend drove for a few years a while back and he told me he was driving a rig very late at night in Utah. Driving on a lesser used 2-lane highway, he said he remembers feeling very alert that night, so he noticed what appeared to be a figure manifesting up ahead in the dark road. He said it wasn't on the road but just next to it. He then comes to a stop and grabs his heavy-duty flashlight and points it at the figure. He then describes it. Apparently, this humanoid creature had a dead coyote it was eating and the truck had gotten its attention and pissed it off. So the creature sort of stands up so he can get a full view of the thing. It was gaunt, with very big eyes, and of course, the coyote blood all over its face. Its height was about 6'2". It had skinny limbs, no clothing. He then describes how it started to shuffle slowly towards the truck. Not only does he not have a weapon at the time, the only usable weapon he has is his flashlight, which is actively helping him view the creature. He decides to book it and leave. He had no problem passing it, turning around to see it standing in the middle of the road on 2 legs as he drove away. When he reaches the nearest rest stop, he sees 2 other truckers talking. Apparently, my friend wasn't the only one to see this thing. Both the 2 guys looked as horrified as he was. As for my opinion on my friend's encounter, I have to say my friend isn't one to lie, so his story had me intrigued. I told him maybe what he saw was some mentally ill person out there, but he brushed the idea off, saying that he knew it wasn't human. I'm not the superstitious type, but his story really did creep me out. Okay, I got one. While I was actually driving a bus, made out of a truck, in the deserts of Central Australia, I was over 500 kilometres from the nearest town. So yeah, middle of nowhere stuff. So I was out on a 5-day charter to pick up a bunch of Aboriginal elder ladies to go and get their women's business health checks done, pap smears and mammograms, I believe. On the day I took them to go get that done, we went via a place called Mintabi, so they could shop in the clothing and whatever store that was randomly in this little opal mining area of South Australia. We left from there quite late to make the 3-hour or so journey back to where we were all staying overnight. The next day, I'd take them back to their respective desert communities. The passengers all fell asleep as they'd had a very long day, as had I, but that's my job. Even the nurse who was travelling with us fell asleep. So there's me, all alone in the cab of the Mercedes truck-derived bus, my 30 passengers all sleeping in the darkness of the passenger pod behind the cab, and it was around 9 p.m. Up ahead in the distance, I see a headlight coming towards me along the lonely, deserted desert dirt road. So I dip my lights so the spotlights go off and adjust to see only what low beam will show me. I drive down into a slight dip of a dry creek bed, expecting to see the car with only one headlight anytime shortly. It's nothing unusual to see a car with only one headlight out there, so I'm not even remotely bothered. As I come out of the dip, I put my spotlights and high beams back on and there is no car. Nothing, just the empty dirt road. There is no dust in the air and I can see a good distance in front of me and out to each side. There was nothing there, just the empty desert, the dirt road and me alone in the cab. I keep the lights on until we come to a stop about an hour later. I didn't see any cars or anything the rest of the journey. Before I let the passengers out, I ask if any of them saw the light, and they all go dead silent. And after a short while, they start talking to each other in their own language. And then they all get off the bus. A few minutes later, a couple of ladies come up to me and ask me to tell them exactly what I saw without leaving anything out and to describe exactly where I saw it. Now, I'm a big guy. I've lived on 3 continents. I've been a police officer, a teacher, a bus and coach driver, truck driver, all sorts of things. And let's just say I'm pretty skeptical, but I do have an open mind. I'm not scared by much in this world. After I told these ladies everything from start to finish and described in minute detail exactly where it happened, I took note of exactly how far out we were when it happened. The 2 ladies looked at me with the whites showing in their eyes. They looked spooked, and then they said, and I'll never forget the way they said it. I got on great with the indigenous people of Central Australia, and I trust that I know when something rattles them. They said, "Driver, we are so lucky that you did not stop, because if you did, no one would have seen any of us ever again. We'd all be gone." I asked why, and they just shook their heads and said not to talk about it because it had scared the ladies. I'm sure many people have heard about the Min Min lights in Western Queensland. Well, whatever these ladies knew about whatever I saw in our location, they were convinced that it wasn't something you wanted to meet in the desert at night. I only ever saw this once. I only saw it for maybe a minute, and it looked just like a car headlight a couple of kilometres away up the road. But I'll tell you what, if the ladies that come from this area and whose people have survived in this desolate, remote part of the continent for 60,000 years are worried to the point that they're all scared, I certainly don't want to mess with it, whatever it is. Around 2006-ish, I was driving flatbed. Picked up a load of construction material, drywall, roofing, don't remember, but it was all pre-packaged in boxes, and I remember having to use strap protectors on the load. In rural Tennessee. Memory is foggy now, but I want to say it was between Memphis and Nashville, but closer to the intersection of the state lines. Tarp was required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road, in the middle of nowhere, woods on 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. I found a shelter and pulled over to fix it. I realised that I just did a bad job of tarping this load and decided to redo it on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up on the load and start unrolling the tarps again, and I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it, other than to keep my eye on him, because I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I continue doing what I'm doing. About the time I have tarps set in place and I'm climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this dude is getting close enough now to see that I'm paying more attention to him than I am to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working just in case. 8-pound solid metal bar, about 4 feet long, tapered to a blunt point on one end and hollow at the other, used for tightening straps and chains, etc. This guy gets to me and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's patchy as fuck. Like he tried to cut his own hair and had a seizure in the process and said, "Fuck it, it's good enough to party." The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I can only describe as off. Like they were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it also gives me the distinct impression that the elevators didn't go all the way up. His clothes were dirty and not well maintained, with dirty white tennis shoes, because I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me, waits until I acknowledge him and just says, "I've got a long walk." I'm like, "Yeah man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere," making it clear that there's no rides to be had here. He nods, starts walking by me, continuing on his way, stops at about the driver's door on my truck and turns around, comes back and repeats himself. "I've got a long walk." At this point, I explained to him that I can't give him a ride, insurance and all that, apologise for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this, turns around, and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him while he's moving away from me. As I'm putting on the last of my bungee straps, I look over to check where he's at, and he's turned around, heading back towards me, now about 100 yards in front of my truck coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone, has his hand up to his face, and I can barely make out his mouth moving, his other hand waving like he's having a conversation with somebody. I finish my straps, grab my winch bar, and I'm climbing into my truck as he's about 10 yards away. As soon as I'm in the cab, I lock the doors, set the winch bar on the passenger seat, just in case. I look at the guy, and I realise he's not talking on the phone. He's talking to his freaking hand. And now I'm nervous, because he doesn't look like he's having a very pleasant chat. It looks more like an angry conversation. I crank the truck up, put it in the gear, and pull out. Didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand to his face, with this dead-ass look on his face just staring at me. Gave me the creeps. About the time I hit 5th or 6th gear, I look in the mirror, and there's no one there. Hi guys, thank you for listening if you made it this far, and thank you for putting up with me and my very sore throat. I still wanted to make a video. It is what it is. If you like the video, please hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, etc, etc, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Also, I got some really cool merch. Look, look, look. Thanks for looking.